So good morning, everyone. My name is Amber Vlangas, and I'm with Restorative Action Alliance. We are a regional advocacy and support group. We exist to reduce cycles of sexual harm, and we don't believe that we need to use state violence in order to do that. And what we mean by that is there are a lot of things that we do in response to sexual violence, registries being one of them, onerous probation and parole systems, lengthy sentencing, all of those things. We believe that there are better ways that are more restorative and transformative and honor the dignity of people to do so. So this morning, I'm really excited to be here to speak with you. And it's really nice that we have sort of a small group, because for this topic and also for the circles that we will do later, that really lends itself to deep connection. And so I'm going to start off with telling you, I talked a little bit about Restorative Action Alliance, but let's start with who I am. So as I mentioned, my name is Amber, and I am a survivor of sexual violence and also an individual whose family has been very deeply impacted by the criminal legal system and specifically registries. I am the wife of an individual who is required to register. So I find myself with a lot of dualities when I speak with people, and sometimes people say to me, "Oh, well, it must be so hard. Your story is so unique." So I'm here to tell you that my story is not that unique, because we really need to be starting to tear down these ideas that we have a set of people who have been victimized and a set of people who are the victimizers. So a lot of what we do at Restorative Action Alliance, and we do things through education, litigation, and legislative advocacy, is really about building safer communities and primary prevention of sexual harm. And we talk about meaningfully accountability that still holds space for the humanity of the person who caused harm. And we are always looking to safeguard the civil liberties of everyone. So we simply just don't believe that if you are creating injustice against a person, that somehow represents justice for someone else. So that's a little bit about me and the organization. What we're talking about today is our Restorative Action Alliance Peer Support Circle program. And this is representative of sort of the support that we provide to people who have either been affected by sexual harm or registries or the criminal legal system. And so these circles are designed to hold space and provide pro-social support for those who are impacted. And we currently hold them in a virtual space. They can be done in person as well. We were founded in 2020, which was one of the best years to found an organization. And we found ourselves in a very virtual world and having to adapt concepts to how we were able to interact at the time. One of the great things about that is that they are not geography specific. So individuals can participate in circles no matter where they are in the country or even in the world. We form the circles based on shared lived experience. And one of our most popular circles is actually a registry impacted circle that brings individuals who are either required to register or people who are their loved ones or support people in circle together. So I do want to say that we usually don't put individuals in the same circle as their own loved one. And we'll talk a little bit more about what circles are, but this gives you the basis for like who this program is serving. So let's start talking a little bit about restorative practices and circles in general. So just by show of hands, who in this room, when you hear sort of the word restorative circle, think about what is usually called like victim offender conferencing? Is that like the first thing that comes to mind for you? Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about restorative practices, because this is sort of a way of being and a social science that really speaks to the interconnectedness of people. And it encompasses a lot of different practices, not just victim offender conferencing, which is what is most well known. So our circles are what are called community building circles or healing circles, and they are really designed to bring people together in a safe space for connection, community building, learning from one another, and healing. It is important to note that they are not therapy or case management. That is not the role that they serve. Circle keepers are trained in restorative practice. So they go through a training program that also includes practicum, like being in circle, and then they sort of graduate to leading circles. And so they're trained in restorative practices, circle care, and they are always a person who has some sort of shared lived experience. So that's where the peer comes in. And they are an equal participant in the group. So we'll talk a little bit more about like the structure of circles, and then it will start to become a little bit clearer, like how can somebody like lead a group and also be an equal participant. It's because of how circles are structured. So when we start to talk about circle practice, it is absolutely imperative that we acknowledge that this is not a new concept. This is not something that, we sat around and said, hey, let's like develop this. Restorative practices and circles echo ancient and indigenous practices that have been employed by cultures around the world since forever, right? So you see them showing up in Native American, First Nation Canadian, African, Asian, Celtic, Hebrew, Arab, and many, many other cultures. So again, we're talking about building healthy, empathetic communities, and this is so appropriate that we just sort of talked about this in our opening keynote. What are we trying to do? We're trying to provide spaces where people can heal. They increase social capital among members, decrease antisocial behavior, can be utilized to repair harm, as we talked about with sort of those conferences, and can restore relationships. It's about being in relationship with one another. So circle practice itself, which is sort of a subset of all restorative practice, is a social structure that has helped people come together in collaborative dialogue and action, again, since the beginning of time. So you can sort of think of it like our ancestors came around a campfire, right? They wanted to keep themselves warm. They told stories. They wanted to establish rules of how they might govern themselves. And they wanted to feel that support and have connection. And circles really enable us to discover our collective wisdom. So now we'll get in just to sort of what are the roles that in the structure in a circle. So you have basically three basic roles in a circle. You have circle members. So those, anybody who is in circle is a participant. Their responsibility is to participate fully, to keep to the circle values, which we'll talk a little bit about, to honor their own truth, to hold accountability, The circle keeper is an equal participant. So going back to sort of that fire analogy, the circle keeper, even though they are a full participant in the circle, they keep the fire going. They monitor the space. The guardian is not the same as a circle keeper and can be sort of a designated member of the circle. And so this is a person who basically, again, going back to the analogy, make sure that people are not getting burned in the fire, right? So keeping an eye on like how everyone is interacting. And then if there are moments of discomfort, because this is what circle can hold, the guardian can ring a bell, have some sort of audible signal to say, let's come back to our central agreements because we might be getting just a little bit far afield. So the magic of circle is in the mechanics. So circle can hold so many things with the structure. It can hold deep truths. It can hold discomfort, hope, joy, innovation, deep listening, celebration, so many things, and the circle will hold. And so this is why these practices that have been modernized for our current context, that have been used for many, many centuries, are so wonderful. Circles are built on relationships, being in right relationship. And if relationship is sort of broken down, because harm has occurred, circles can hold and bring those things back into right relationship. So the 4 relational elements you'll see in a circle are just sort of everyone getting acquainted. Like, who am I in circle with? Who are you? Like, where do you come from? How do you identify yourself? Those types of things. Developing plans and a sense of unity within the group. Creating shared agreements. How are we going to interact with each other when we're in this sacred space that we're creating together? Setting intent or the content. So for our peer circles, our intent is really centered around personal growth. So, you know, a lot of times you may have different groups that come together and they serve different purposes. Maybe there's a social aspect. Maybe it's an advocacy slant. But what we don't do in our peer support circles is create prompts and conversations that are solely structured around, oh, I'm on the registry, it's really horrible, oh, you know, this. So a prompt might be like, what is bringing you joy today and why? And so, or it might be, what is a disappointment that you experienced? Can you share about that? So while the issues, because registry issues or issues of sexual harm encompass the entirety of your life, it's a safe space to bring those things up because you have shared lived experience. It is not the focus because we're creating pro-social support, we're creating forward movements. And then of course, building understanding and trust because you have people, there's an expectation that there will be people from different walks of life, people have different ideas, and they're sharing their own truth. So the components of a circle, and this is basically like what happens when you come in circle. Do you just sort of sit down and start talking? And you know what? There's a very specific structure to a circle, and all built on the idea that we are all intertwined. We're wired to connect, and every person in circle holds value. And we have something that we can learn from each other. So oftentimes circle will start off with the circle keeper sort of doing a welcome. The circle, when you first convene, you create shared agreements with one another, and we'll go over some examples of that. So again, those are those guidelines, like how are we going to interact what are our agreements and commitments to one another as we interact in this space? And so we usually start off with sort of some standard agreements, and then the circle will bring sort of their own individualized agreements to the table. So then we have a talking piece. So what you see on the screen here is just a painted rock. A talking piece indicates that whoever has that talking piece in the circle, I'm sorry, there's a deer, a warden outside walking. Okay, so so the talking piece indicates that whoever has that piece in the circle is the person talking, and that is passed around the circle. And this is a really, really great way to interact because it offers the opportunity for the person who has the talking piece to speak. We always are mindful of speaking time, but it also gives them that space. It also slows down the conversation so that people have time to deeply reflect or interrogate their initial reactions to something somebody else says without immediately replying, jumping in, thinking about what they're going to say next. It really encourages deep connection and deep listening.
I have a question about the talking
piece.
Should I wait till the end, or?
Go ahead.
How do you facilitate that online? Do you just take turns, or how do people claim the talking piece?
That's a really great question. So we pass with our words. And so we'll talk a little bit how we adapt that in the virtual environment. But you might indicate that you're done speaking and then say, I would like to pass to you call somebody by name. And so it is a little bit of a challenge to do that in a virtual space, but again, during those agreements and when you're welcoming people into circle, you create those standards.
Can I just add that?
Yes.
So, Amber asked me to come today to help demonstrate later, so I'm Jason. And we also did this recently with a group that's online.
Mm-hmm.
And in the group, I had one of the things that you bring as
the circle keeper?
The circle keeper.
Okay.
Words. The circle keeper can come with a talking piece, even if you're virtual. So, and it's supposed to be something that's meaningful. So I'm sitting there in my space, and I saw my mother was into the whalers from Connecticut, she passed a couple years ago, and I have a glass whale that she had. So as I'm sitting there, I held up the whale and said, "This is our talking piece." So then I'd say, "Well, I'm going to virtually give the glass whale to Amber." So who has the whale? So then you said, Amber would say, "I have the whale," and then she would say, "I'm passing the whale." So you're talking about the talking piece. It's just
exactly
words, but you actually can even see it because the circle keeper comes with something visual for everybody to implement.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do that. Was there another question?
Oh, I was just going to add, in addition, so the indigenous roots of the talking piece, and like you said, something meaningful, is to center us and remind us of our place of unification, unity, and to the earth, right? So in native practices, they usually use a bird's feather. There's different things that help us just, so if you're talking and you're holding that, you can use that to center yourself in, place and community. And so it holds that indigenous purpose.
Thank you so much for adding that. Yes, so the talking piece is really one of the central components of Circle that helps us create the space in a way that encourages that centering, that deep listening, that interaction in a way that, again, is thoughtful and a little bit slower, and having us taking the time to really think about what's going on. So everything is also rooted in ceremony. It's important to create the circle and create the sacred space that you're within. So during an opening, you might ring a bell. We're going to utilize singing bowls here today to indicate that we are coming into circle. Take a moment to sort of center or utilize it for whatever is most meaningful to you. So because people have different practices, if you want to say a prayer during that time, if you want to do some breathing, whatever it is that allows you to sort of put everything outside of the circle and come into circle and arrive there being ready to connect with folks in circle. Oftentimes we will utilize poetry to sort of open up that may be relevant to some of the prompts for the day, quotes, poetry. Some circle keepers use music. It really can be whatever is meaningful to the circle keeper and to the group. So then you would go into what's called the heart sharing round. And so
I
yes.
apologize.
Yes.
We are gonna have to take a 5-minute
Okay,
because they need to deal with the deer.
okay, okay, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
I made coffee.
Okay, and there is coffee.
So the last one out of the room, if you could just close the door.
All right, we'll be back, everyone online.
I was like filling out my cave friends.
What is
Yep. They're gone.
Yes.
We're good.
I wonder, maybe he was there for a while.
And then on her advisory board,
So what happened?
on her advisory board is John Duxford.
No,
Yeah.
everything
They
is
got- they took
Who
them.
did
So he was
facilitate
dead.
part of the training that Jill did.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
our-
Nice.
Also this, I don't remember her name, but she lives up in like Hudson, New York, she's, or upstate or whatever, she's Native American. She's-
Oh, yes.
Jill knows her, I don't remember her name.
Yeah.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yes.
She's amazing, like the way
Yes,
she's.
yes.
And they didn't want us to watch. Yeah. I didn't want to watch. So. I'll go.
Just trying to join the circle.
Well,
Did you go to the, did you also go, Jill, there's like a restorative justice conference.
in DC.
Yeah,
Yeah,
DC.
it was in
and
DC.
Jill went to
I was not able to go, but there were so many great facilitators and
Yeah.
presentations for that.
Yeah.
I saw, I wasn't,
Yeah.
you were,
Did you see him come down the hill or what you?
no, I saw him there.
Oh.
And I was thinking, gee, that's odd, the deer is just there. And then. Lisa said-
No, I didn't, I couldn't see him, so I was just like,
No, I
okay.
was looking at the whole, because, no, I'm looking right, not
thought
that I
you said he
wasn't
went
focusing on
fast.
you,
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
saying-
I actually, I'm not gonna lie, I had a bit of a, I saw like a uniformed person, I had a bit of a trauma response. Like, so I was like,
What
what, is there
emergency
a
is going
SWAT
on?
team outside?
Yo.
I was like,
I didn't even see, I just saw the people walking by.
so I don't know if we're still live online, but if you're online, thank you for your patience. We had a deer. And it's been handled and now we're back in the room.
I apologize.
No problem.
We didn't think about the poor people.
Yeah.
Probably should have explained.
It's all up in there.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what our time looks like based on our break, but we're just gonna, I'm just gonna keep talking and take questions until somebody says, you're all done.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We're good.
Okay, so where we were before we had our adventure was talking about the heart sharing round. So again, the circle keeper will share a prompt of some type. Again, those things really can be anything that are thought-provoking. Question, it's basically posing a question to the circle And
Could you give an example?
yes, so like, for instance, again, it could be something as simple as describe a disappointment in your life. It could be describe someone in your life who supports you, or a time where you felt supported and what that meant to you. So it really can be structured in such a way. At Restorative Action Alliance, we try to have them be centered around personal growth and deep reflection and sharing. Sometimes it can, it really is not meant to drive the conversation in any sort of direction. It's just creating the space for dialogue and conversation and listening to occur. So it really could be anything. And oftentimes circle keepers get pretty creative with them. And as you start to, these groups are in 16-week sessions and meet every other week. So this is a good format for us because it provides a start and an end, and our circle keepers are all volunteers. So they know what they're committing to. But what can also happen is that if the circle really bonds together, they really love each other, and they would like to continue, they can re-up for sort of another 16 weeks. We have one circle that's been going on for 4 years.
Wow.
So people often create very deep relationships with one another in circle because the format can really create that. So after you do what's called a round, okay? And so it starts at the circle keeper, who often models in the beginning when the circle is just forming. Then it doesn't always have to start, like the first response doesn't have to come from the circle keeper, because everybody starts to learn how we're doing it. And then the talking piece is passed around and everybody has the opportunity to respond to the prompt. So then the circle keeper will move into what's called the harvesting round. And so just to say, this is how we do our circles. You can do circles in a number of different ways. So I just want to say, like, these are the guidelines that we use, but it's not the only way to do circle. People can do very creative things. And so the harvesting round is people's opportunity to sort of respond to something that they've heard. And oftentimes people will say something like, wow, you know what, so-and-so, what you said really resonated with me, and here's why, speaking their own truth. Or you might want to approach something with curiosity, like somebody said something and you weren't sure if you heard them right, or you weren't sure, frankly, how you felt about it, right? Because sometimes discomfort comes up when people say things that we don't understand. So you might ask a clarifying question. So again, the harvesting round really is the opportunity for the members of the circle to sort of respond to what happened in the heart sharing round. And so there may be any number of rounds depending on how many people you have, how much time you have allotted. Oftentimes there may be just a time to do sort of open sharing, just saying, like, does somebody want to sell, is somebody struggling with something that you would like to ask the circle about? Or does somebody have a celebration that they would like to share? And we have a lot of those as well. And then we go to the closing. So the closing is, again, based on ceremony, so that you can have that indication that we are coming out of circle, and we do it exactly as we open the circle. So we have a moment of silence or reflection, and that's a great time to just think about, like, the things that have been shared, reflect on it, hold it in your heart so that you can bring it with you out for the next 2 weeks, because again, we meet every 2 weeks. And the bell ringing, and then usually a quote to bring, a quote or a poem to bring with you along the way until we're together again. So that's sort of the components. Do we have any questions? Or I can tell that, like, there are people in the room who are familiar with restorative practices, maybe some additional adding to the conversation before we talk a little bit about agreements. Yes?
I was just gonna say, Ms. Camp, for your question too, again, it will be dependent on the intention of the circle.
Right.
Right, sometimes if you're looking at like a reparative circle, there's a lot of pre-work that goes into
Yes.
when you meet as a circle, and individuals will discuss with the circle keeper, and they may have questions they come up with before. But this is more of like a peer, like supportive circle, and then there's a myriad, like it depends on what the circle meaning intention is. But the questions can always vary based on that.
Right.
That's helpful.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's exactly right.
And then, I mean, just, and, because you said, right, it's not therapy or it's not case management. But what if during the hard sharing or, like, well, I guess in the hard sharing or harvesting, like, someone expresses something that opens a wound, for the want of a better word, how is that handled before we get to the closing?
Yeah, so that's a really excellent question. And so what we provide to our circle keepers are resources, because again, when we bring people into circle, there is an intake process. So we're making sure that we're matching them with a circle that is we match people based on shared lived experience. We talk to them about what supports they have. And all of that is sort of in the intake process. We also provide resources to circle keepers. So if something bubbles up for someone in circle, which can happen and does happen, that they have those resources to say, here's someone you can talk to, here is, because that is very, very important. And that's part of the circle training, that when something like that happens in circle, you can be prepared for it. Excellent question.
I know you said it's about 16 weeks, but each circle itself, how much time?
It's usually about 2 hours. We try to keep them to 2 hours. And the other thing that's important to know, for our circles, we try to limit them to about 10 people. Because if you get a much larger circle, which can be done in different contexts, you're not going to have the same level of sort of deep connection. You're going to be there for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
You won't be able to fit it into 2 hours. But yes, also an excellent question. So yes, Jason.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Just kind of adding on a little bit too, like, if somebody, to the other question about, if something comes up, if something comes up in a circle, right, if it's appropriate, the circle keeper's gonna do what they can in regard.
Of course, yes, there is trauma-informed training as part of the circle, circle keeper training,
The
yes.
other thing is that the circle keepers, because we're doing it as part of a large organization, so circle keepers have access, they might not have the answer at that moment, but they have access to, our organization. So, we would tell you, if Amber was running a circle, she might, and she runs into, she might call me up and say, hey, you just had this situation, what do you think? And who do we know and who can we call? And we've trained, as Amber talked about, there's other folks that have been trained, if they go into a situation and they don't have to solve a problem. That's not the point on that day, but it's like, who can we refer them to? How do we get the help that people need? And recognizing where we're not going to be able to solve it.
Exactly. Yes, thank you for adding that, Jason. So this is an example of sort of the base level shared agreements that we start with. I already mentioned that a central tenet of restorative practices is that everyone in the circle has equal value. So when you're in person, that's really sort of the mechanics of the circle, actually sitting in a circle, right? Like that is the purpose of that, rather than sitting at a table with someone at the head and so there are a number of different ways that you can create that in the virtual environment. You have to really lean into this in your agreement so that everybody understands. And so when somebody does an intake, they look at sort of the base level agreements and agree that they can abide by these guidelines and be part of setting additional guidelines as part of the circle. We ask people to speak from the heart, but share their own truth. listen from the heart. So you might hear that in other places as one mic. That is really with the talking stick, makes it a little easier to do. I will say that, you know, nobody is perfect, and sometimes people go afield of the agreements, and we bring them back around because Circle can hold that. All that is offered is by invitation and never by demand. So if the talking piece comes to you and in that moment you have nothing to share or you don't feel comfortable sharing, you can simply pass it along. So it is very, very important that, again, we're creating this place of safety and this sacred space for people to feel that everything that they do is on them. So that gives, and this is particularly important for folks who feel like they are not necessarily in control of their own lives because they are deeply system impacted, right? This is a space where they can make decisions on what they share, they don't share, so on and so forth. We ask people to maintain accountability for their own words and actions. And so that means if, you know, harm does occur or perceived harm happens in the circle, then we have ways that we can deal with that because we're already building that trust within our circle. The circle can hold that as well. Welcoming and expecting different points of view. We all have different experiences in our life and lenses with which we look at things. And so that is just the expectation that that will happen. This is one that when I first started engaging in restorative practices, that was a little bit hard for me because I'm a helper. I want to help people. I want to fix things. I want to speak your own truth. Do not try to fix, advise, save other people. So what that looks like is, again, speaking your own truth. So if someone says, I did this thing, and you know, you might be thinking in your head, well, I can clearly see like that thing that you did, you know, I would have handled it a different way, right? So rather than saying you should have, you could have, I might be like, I encountered something similar in my life, and this is the way I navigated it. And I would tell that story. And that person can accept and take from that story whatever is meaningful to them, right? So I'm not saying you should have, you could have, things like that. And that is just such a lovely way to interact and creates a lot of space for learning from other people and people being in an uncondemned state, right? Because when you start to try to fix or save, a lot of misunderstandings can occur. So always maintaining confidentiality, and we only have a very few exceptions to this. So just like anything else, if somebody says in circle, which I am proud to say has never ever happened in our circles, I have an intent to go kill my girlfriend after this circle, I would have to report that, right? If people state an intention to cause harm to themselves or other that is an imminent threat, that would need to be. This has never happened in the history of our years of doing circles, but it can. So we always have to make sure that we share that with people. And otherwise, people's personal stories, you want to take the learning, right? Like things that you learn in circle that you can apply to your life, take that out into the world with you, but you can't take other people's personal stories outside of the circle with you. Be part of setting circle expectations. We already sort of chatted about that. And that is where, you know, these are the guidelines, these are the expectations. And we ask people to sort of add to those. And then respond to others with open questions. This is sort of that approaching things with curiosity, right? So if you don't understand something that somebody says, something somebody says may have caused discomfort for you, taking a moment, interrogating, like, you know, what is it that maybe made me feel that way in my body or my mind, and asking a question, like, what did you mean by that? Or, you know, again, approaching with that curiosity. I see Josiah over there, and I don't know if I'm being
No, you're fine.
hooked, like, are you gonna get the hook? And so let's talk a little bit about what people report they experience when they participate in circles. So deeper connections due to the circle format. So oftentimes people say, oh, I went to a support group meeting and everybody sat around and complained about how the world was so horrible and this and that. And so just by nature of the format of the peer support circles, there can be discomfort, there can be disappointment, but there's also a lot of uplifting. And I will have to say, as a circle keeper, there have been moments where I'm like, you know what, today, I don't know if I can show up. And I show up and I'm so uplifted by my fellow folks in circle. I'm like, how did I ever like think, because I am gaining just as much as I'm sharing within circle. The folks report increased ability to consider differing opinions, because again, that's the format and space that we're creating. Increased ability to interrogate their own reactions and take a moment to self-reflect. It builds confidence, encouragement, and support to make their voice heard through advocacy. So, you know, we're here at the PARSOL conference, and often what we find is as people are on their journey, you can't show up for advocacy if you can't show up for yourself and you don't have the support that you need to really thrive. So, and these are direct responses from a survey that we did in 2023. People talk about reduced feelings of isolation and shame, which is very, very important for people who have experienced sexual harm, and also people who are on registries. Again, that dichotomy that like people are so different, the experience is different, but the humanity is very much the same. They talk about, I've never had a safe space. I've never felt safe, but I feel safe here in this circle. Feeling better equipped to navigate the challenges of the registry or survivorship. Like they know that if anything, they have this consistent space that they can show up in and give and receive support. And then improved listening skills. These are just sort of the highlights. There are many other responses. And so here we are at the end of the presentation. We are going to do a break, and then we are going to come back here for those who would like to actually participate in circle. We're going to break into 2 circles. We're going to have to figure out how to make that happen in here. But does anybody have any reflections, sharings, questions about the presentation today? Yes, ma'am.
I had a quick question about the groups that you run that are virtual. Are they statewide, or like do you?
We have people from all around the country that
Oh, wow.
participate. So they're not geography specific. And so people can find out about that by going to our website, which is restorativeactionalliance.org. And there is sort of a form that you fill out. Then you will get a call back from an intake. So then that's the opportunity to see if there is a circle available. And we form circles based on need, right? So there's not always a circle available, but we sort of form them as we get groups that we can sort of group together that makes sense.
And I'm assuming these are free.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, free
That's
of
amazing.
charge. We're trying to spread the harm reduction throughout the world and circle practice. If I had my way, every person on the face of the earth would be in a circle of some kind, because it is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I know personally it's helped me so much.
Can you
Yes,
give
ma'am.
an example of some of the themes or intentions?
So, really, they just vary so much. Like, again, it's up to the circle keeper, but there can be things like, it's always a question. It's always posed as a question, or can you describe? Because circle's really about storytelling, right? So can you describe a time in your life when
No, I
X,
don't
Y,
mean
Z
that. I
happened?
mean the overall, like if someone needs a circle that meets this issue in their life.
You can use circles for really
So they're
you can use
generic.
community building circles for anything. You can
Okay.
group people based on shared lived experience. Circles are used for cancer survivors. Circles are used for healthcare providers. Circles are used for people in reentry. People are the container of circle is just about bringing people together in a safe space. And it's often most useful to have people who have some sort of shared lived experience. But they can be used, that's the beauty of it, they can be
So if
used for
someone
anything.
calls you guys and says, is there a circle available for such
So
and such?
our organization runs circles for survivors, people who are impacted by registries.
Right.
We do have a mindful meditative art circle that's open to all people who are impacted by the criminal legal system. So it's generally in the sense of reentry and sexual harm that we provide circles for. Yes.
It's more of like a comment. So like there was like the story, like in your present, there's like the storytelling round, and then you kind of have the harvesting
Yes.
where you have the, I guess, to clarify, react, and then kind of another way to, I guess sometimes it's framed as like you have the storytelling round, which is kind of like what's happened in the past, and then a reflection question, something that's how you currently feel about a particular issue, and then an application question where how can you, that could be part of where the advocacy comes in. How can we address that within the community?
Right, so again, you can do as many rounds as you like.
Right.
To be honest, in a 2-hour time frame, when you have 10 people in a circle, it's very difficult to get through multiple rounds and also provide a little bit of space for like open sharing, that, people might want to ask questions or share a very specific thing that's going on in their life or a celebration. Yes, sir.
This might sound like a little grand, but as I'm reflecting on this and I'm listening to it, this has the potential to actually change the nation, the way people think. So
Yes, it's
I
not
got what you're
grand.
saying.
Say it louder for people in the back. Wait, you're in the back. Come up to the front.
I got exactly what you're saying and what you're trying to convey in a really short time. So how do I become a part of this? Because it has the potential to change the way that people think. This is exactly the format it needs to be out there.
Yes, yes, so there are many avenues that you can take to get involved with restorative practice. We also, Restorative Action Alliance does train circle keepers, so we do trainings. Part of training with Restorative Action Alliance is that there is that practicum. So then you would you would participate in circles, then you would graduate to leading circles. So again, that's all virtually based, so it's non-geographic specific. We do, for the circle training, we often provide scholarships, but there is a small fee because we're a nonprofit organization and we have to sustain ourselves. But you can definitely, if you're interested in getting involved with that. But what I recommend to people is spend significant time in circle. Don't just decide one day, hey, I'm gonna be a circle keeper, because it just
at the same time, I ran groups in the prisons for about 10 years. They were all circle
that's
based.
valuable
So I understand like what the circle is. We had to keep the same format. We ran it as if it was a native circle to whatever indigenous culture you come from. At one point in time, I studied the 5% doctrine, so we call it a cipher. It was the same exact thing. So the whole concept and the format is exactly what's needed. And I watched it civilize men in the prison
Thank
who
you.
any other time would never speak to another person. So I get exactly what you're saying.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
So this is a good time for us to break and then
Yeah.
it'll be the second.
Perfect.